Hey everyone, in this video, I'm going to forge out the blade for my Viking Seax. I'm going to use my 5-ton log splitter press to thin out the leaf spring. I don't have kiss blocks for the 5-ton press yet, so I drilled some holes in the bottom die, and then I'll slip these bolts in to use as kiss blocks. I added a washer to each side, and that gave me an exact 1/4 inch between the top and bottom die. I'll start from the tip and work my way back. After a few passes on the press, I'll take it to the anvil just to keep things nice and straight. And then I'll just go back to the press and keep thinning out the blade. I'll keep going until the dies touch the bolts. Once I get close to the length that I need, I'll cut that extra material off with the angle grinder. Then back to the forge to heat up the tang side. Using the little 5-ton press, it took me about 3 passes to thin the steel out to that 1/4 inch. There's 1, 2, and then 3. I'll take it back to the anvil and make sure everything's nice and straight and fits the profile as close as possible. So now that my tip is the profile that it needs to be, I will use my guillotine and set the tang. I marked where I wanted to set the tang, and then I moved it back about a 1/2 inch before I set the tang with the guillotine. That way I can make sure there's enough material to grind into ricasso. Once I set the grooves with the guillotine, I'll make sure to keep it nice and flat on the anvil between each heat. I'll heat it back up and then set the grooves a little deeper, and then I'll make sure to keep that flat until I get the width that I need for the tang. And so now I have the width I need for the tang. I'll take it to the press and finish drawing out the tang. It's a lot easier to press in the metal from the sides, so I'll be real careful not to go too deep. I'll just do about half the distance on the first pass, and then I'll flatten that out with the kiss blocks. Then I'll do my second pass and get closer to the final thickness. And then I'll do another pass with the kiss dies, just to make sure it has that 1/8 inch thickness all the way through the tang. I'll just cut off the extra material with the hardy cutoff tool. Now I can clean up the tang on the anvil, make sure everything is nice and straight. I'll run it through the press with the kiss dies one last time, just to make sure it's all that 1/4 inch thickness. So now I know that I'm a 1/4 inch all the way through from tip to tang. I'll just take it to the anvil one last time and make sure everything is nice and straight and even. Then I'll put it back in the forge and heat it back up to 1650 degrees. Then I'll turn the forge off and let it anneal overnight. I'll use a grinding disc on the angle grinder and try to remove as much of the scale on the outside as possible. If you could tell right here, the scale is super hard. I had to put the angle grinder up on end and really try to dig into that scale to get it to come off. That was some of the hardest scale I think I've ever seen. Once the scale comes off, I'll move real quick to make sure I don't dig into the metal. I'll remove all the scale from the edges as well. Now I'm going to switch to the large contact wheel on the belt grinder, and I'll use a 40 grit belt to start, and I'll grind the surface as flat as I can get it. I'll make sure to keep going until all those divots are out and it's as flat as it can be. Once I'm done with the contact wheel on the belt grinder, I'll switch to the 4x36 grinder and use that to get the surface as flat as I can. I'll spray the blade with the tool ink layout fluid and mark the profile, and then I'll go back to the 4x36 and make sure the spine and the cutting edge are parallel. I mark the center of the blade all the way down through the tang, and then I mark the profile of the tang. I'll make sure the tool rest on the belt grinder is a perfect 90 degrees from the flat platen, and then I'll grind right up to the scribe lines to grind out the profile of the tang. I'll use a file jig to make sure that the shoulders match perfect for when it fits into the guard. I'll grind in the plunge lines with my bevel jig, and that'll help me find the perfect angle for the bevels. I was gonna grind in the bevels by hand, but then I decided to sleep on it and come back to this tomorrow. So now that it's a fresh new day, I decided to grind my bevels with the bevel jig. That way, I know I'll get nice straight bevels on both sides of the blade, and I'll blend the bevels right into the plunge lines. I'm not sure if it was necessary, but I left that extra material on the tip, and I figured I'll grind that after the heat treat. So now I'm going to do some thermocycling on the blade. I'll heat the blade up to 1650 degrees, and I'll try to hold that temperature for about 10 minutes. And then I'll put it in the vermiculite and let it anneal for about 6 hours. It's been about 6 hours, so now I'm going to heat the blade up to 1550 degrees. And I'll try to hold that temp for 10 minutes. And then I'll put it in the vermiculite and let it cool down overnight. So today I'm going to anneal the blade one more time, this time at 1450 degrees, and then I can quench the blade. I try to hold it at 1450 degrees for 10 minutes. I'll try to keep the color uniform and not get too bright. I don't want to go over 1450 degrees. And then I'll let it cool down in the vermiculite one last time. And now I'm ready to quench the blade. I'll heat the blade up to 1550 degrees, and I'll try to make sure I get as even a heat as I can before I go for the quench. And then I'll quench the blade in the Parks 50 quench oil, and I make sure to preheat the quench oil to 120 degrees. To help prevent a warp, I put it in the vise with the angled aluminum pieces and let it cool down. And then I tested it with the files and everything skates really well, so I'm pretty happy about that. So I put it in the oven at 400 degrees for about an hour and a half to let it temper back some. And then I test it with the file one more time and everything seems to skate good. So now I can move on. I'll make sure to turn the variable speed really low on the belt grinder. Definitely don't want to overheat the blade and ruin the temper. And I also use my bare hands. That way I know how hot the blade's getting, and as long as it's not too hot to handle and you're not burning yourself, then you should be okay. When I grind the tip to its final profile, I'll make sure to keep the blade cool and dip it in water between each little grinding that I do, and I'll only grind a little bit at a time. to make sure I don't ruin the temper. I'll sand all the surfaces on the blade to about 400 grit on the belt grinder, and then I'll save the hand sanding for tomorrow. I'll start the hand sanding at 80 grit and then work my way back up to 400 grit. Once I'm done etching the blade, I'll hand sand the surface to a much higher grit. I'm going to be etching some Celtic dragon artwork on the sides of the blade, and I'll make sure to do a full commentary and explain exactly how I do all the steps when I etch the design on the side of the blade. If you want to see how the etching turns out, definitely subscribe and click the little bell notification so it'll let you know when I upload the next video. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Please click the like button if you liked the video and subscribe for more videos. Thank you.